Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And even though the 60 TP has now been in the game for 3.5 years, it is still the kind of tank that just never disappoints me. I have this thing on my main account, I have this thing on my free-to-play account. On my free-to-play account, this was actually the vehicle that ended up enabling me to get gold inside ranked without the need of using premium consumables or firing copious amounts of premium rounds. Although, I will admit that that was before the high explosive nerfs. Since the high explosive nerfs, there's no doubt that this vehicle is far less competitive when it comes from a pure free-to-play sense, without the need to fire high explosive anti-tank when you're going to need it. However, obviously with intuition in the game now, there's far more opportunity to be able to quickly switch out, and you're never in those situations where you're just bouncing your armor-piercing shells when you can quickly switch to high explosive anti-tank, or vice versa. Nothing's worse than the tier 10 tank that you really needed that heat round for suddenly not being in the picture, and now you're having to fire it at a T44 and you really don't want to waste the extra credits, right? When playing at tier 10 is already oh so expensive. This vehicle is just so wonderful in so many ways. 8 degrees of gun depression, pretty darn good frontal hull armor, a big boy caliber gun, 152mm, that can manage to overmatch all 50mm plates with its armor-piercing rounds, and just high-explosive anti-tank rounds that feel like it's worth investing those extra 4,000 credits in if you are dumping in 750 alpha damage. The field mods as well on this vehicle have really helped it out. I'd say that big derpy guns like this definitely benefited massively from the accuracy buffs, and more importantly, this vehicle, which is limited to a 35km/h top speed limit, really got helped out by, I believe is it the 6th or the 7th field mod? I believe it's the 7th field mod actually on this vehicle, which allows it to go 4km/h faster forwards. Accordingly, on my free-to-play account, I'm playing on my main account right here, which is why you see me using premium consumables and firing lots of premium rounds against them. Thanks, Artie. I really appreciated that one, by the way. Beautiful that I had to end up using my premium medkit from my own artillery stunning me. But as I was saying, on my free-to-play account, I actually have 2 setups for this tank. One will be a gun handling setup, where I'm using a gun rammer, vents, and vertical stabilizers. Very normal inside World of Tanks, right? And I also have a setup where I'm dropping the vertical stabilizers to instead use a turbo on this vehicle. And so that means that I don't use the turbo unnecessarily on this tank, I don't feel. It's for those kind of maps where you feel that maybe your team is likely to win, or just a real big map that you really want to chase down your opponents. Because I think if there's one way that this tank, if any way, that it disappoints me, it's that the game is getting faster and faster and faster. And as the vehicle has now been out for 3.5 years, it's definitely one of those tanks that does feel a little bit sluggish towards the latter part of the battle to be able to chase down the damage. And that can be one of the most frustrating things ever, right? To now feel that you're not able to continue in the game, you're not able to use that great alpha damage, you're not able to be able to chase down that extra damage and that extra experience, which is what a lot of people will be gunning for. Because that's the only way really to play after you see that the battle's going to be a victory. However, unnecessarily using the turbo and dropping vertical stabilizers I still think is a bad idea on this tank. It's gun dispersion values when you're moving are pretty horrendous at 0.22, and even on the turret at 0.1. That's really not the kind of boundaries where I'd feel very comfortable dropping the vert stabs. And in a tank like this, where you're packing so much into each individual shot and you want to be reactionary on a ridge line with its fairly flexible 8 degrees of gun depression, I really think you want to do everything that you can to be able to pump up that gun handling. Alrighty then, so I've got 2 artilleries digging around on the left. I'm trying to support them by coming back to base and trying to defend them against the Leopard and the EBR 105. In this situation, I think it could have been fairly cool to actually push down towards the south and maybe try and support my heavies, but I didn't expect that most of the enemy team was also going to have the same idea to go back and defend. And oh, hello, Mr. EBR. Clean shot there. Followed up by the 121B, who I'm actually going to give a big thank you to there, because removing that light tank will allow us to once again have the view range advantage against our opponents, and that's what you want to have when you're trying to keep your artilleries in the game. Artilleries these days, sure, they're not doing the most damage, sure, they're not polishing off kills left, right, and center like they used to. But they're still integral to these end game situations, and if you can keep them alive, you can keep the enemy team honest on a ridgeline, prevent them from just sitting out in the open, and they are something that you should strive to try and look after. Alright, so I was very happy to see that the TVP on the enemy team was down to a one-shot. We're going to have to put 2 rounds into the E100, but the main threat here is going to be the T95 FV4201. So I asked the 121B to fall back to try and get the chieftain up into an ambush, and he might not even realize I'm here. And there we go, artillery starting to do work. I'm going to come around the corner right now. The 121B penetrates a shell. Artillery tracks him. He uses a medkit and a repair kit at the same time. I put a big old 799 damage. So I'm telling the 121B once again to fall back because I really need all of their hit points. If we manage to get caught up here, how are we going to manage to make this 3,000 damage comeback in this battle? And just going hold down against a chieftain in that scenario is not going to work out too well. But I decided to actually fire an HE shell in that situation, but unfortunately for me it looks like the chieftain loops a shell with the APCR into my vehicle, and I kind of get out traded. But maybe I could have bounced that, but one thing's for certain, the chieftain was never going to bounce us. So this 121B is using all of their hit points up, manages to get a clean kill on the chieftain, which is fabulous, and I'm going to support them with a follow-up shell against the AMX M454. I'm pinging the map right now and asking the 121B to fall back. This is probably the most that I've ever asked anybody to fall back in recent memory. And the reason why I'm asking, while I'm asking them to fall back, is because I really don't want that TVP that's a one-shot to sneak up behind us and be able to deal with us. Luckily, the artillery shuts down the TVP at the same time as the TVP shutting down the artillery, and suddenly this game is starting to look at least a little bit closer. I'm hoping I managed to get the shell into the Leopard there, but I decide instead to try and go for that E100's lower plate, and wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Now starting to look pretty clean. Both me and my buddy in the 121B, whose name is Danzel, are now up to 3 kills apiece. And the 121B seems to be going for long range. And I support that. If I can work the ridgeline here, then he can manage to get behind us. So I'm going to fire a chancy shell there against the Badger. And in retrospect, what was really ever the purpose of that? I probably should have either held the shell or reloaded a high explosive round, at least do some kind of damage to the Badger. And I lose 500 hit points. Until that part of the game, I felt like I played pretty tight. And I will fully admit that I think I start to get a little bit nervous here. Wow, I miss a shell underneath the Leopard, and you can see that I put my gun down almost dejected in that sense of failure, that we played so well, and now at the final hurdle I seem to be dropping the baton. So now we're going to be loading a high explosive anti-tank round to see if we can get a lower plate shell on the Badger. I don't quite manage to get it. Looks like I could have possibly penned that Badger some of the time, but instead I'm going to go for a high explosive round here. And oh dear, things aren't going too well for me anymore. As the shell dips towards the right, we don't do even a paltry amount of damage to the Badger. And with that miss, looks like the enemy team are now going to press the advantage, and this is the moment for the game. So the 121B puts a good shot into the Leopard. I'm going to connect a shell into the lower plate of the Badger, fully aimed, and I'm just going to get back to side scraping. This vehicle's a pretty good side scraper. Be careful though, because it has a turret ring here that I might be... Oh, it's behind me. Can't really show. I'll pause for just a second and move myself so I can show you. This turret ring that you see here is actually quite poor when you're side scraping on this tank. So be warned with that. So now, having dealt with the Badger with a single shot, I decide to propel myself forward, and the only way I can see myself dealing with this Badger is to try and turn him and get him to expose himself to the 121B. The Badger realizes that he can't turn to expose himself to the 121B, so instead decides to drive towards the 121B, and suddenly we are right back in this game. Just one clean shot against the Leopard, and now we are up to a huge hit point advantage and dealt 7,901 damage in this game. It's the tank that doesn't disappoint me on my free-to-play. It doesn't disappoint me on my pay-to-win account. And I invite Danzel to a little cheeky platoon here, as I do really felt that we held on very well at the end of this game. We clubbed through the Chieftain. We clubbed through the Badger, which was full health at that situation, and with some great marksmanship from Danzel and some inconsistent marksmanship from me, but at least it still added up to a fairly healthy damage total. We've managed to now get ourselves into a situation where all it is about hunting down the Bat Chatillon 15558. Now, this game actually took place, I believe, in December or November of last year. And it was the first game that I played after coming back to the random queue after ranked. Or was it instead actually the first game that I played on my main account after my free-to-play account? I have to admit, those mission marathons, they definitely take it out of me. But just for a second, I'm going to say to Danzel on my team, go find him. I'll cap for you. You have 2 minutes to find him. I'm letting the 121B know that I definitely want him to be able to get his top gun. I'm not really interested in picking up a 4th kill, even though it would put my damage total over 8,000. I think it'd be far more special if Danzel on our team managed to shut down the enemy. And I don't know, I guess I'm just showing off for the stream at that point. Yeah, a little bit of a wiggle. Is that showing off? Well, I guess possibly. Or maybe I'm just a little bit still hyped up after that Valley engagement. I'm thinking, well, maybe, you know, it's an auto-loading arty. If it does try and sneak up behind me, I at least better be facing where I think he might be. Do you think he's sneaking up round here? Oh, no, he's not sneaking up round there. I think that this is QuickyBaby posing for the inevitable screenshot for the possibility that this might become a YouTube video. So I'm not actually even going to try and kill the artillery here. I'm just going to look cool at the end of the game. And I know that I don't even want that extra little bit of damage compared to giving it to my friend Danzel. And hopefully they're going to be able to get themselves a top gun. And they do. And wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. Look at this absolute graveyard that was created in the valley of Lakeville. My goodness, and this is what the 60 TP can do. It's one of those kind of tanks that just has enough armor to still grind through the situation, has enough alpha damage to provide the big hit and to force your opponents to have to attack you because they don't want you to be out trading them with that kind of high alpha damage. And it has a variety of ammunition for the right kind of situation, and that is why still to this day, even 3 years after this vehicle has come out, and by playing it across my free-to-play account and also my main account, that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, the 60 TP, at least for me, is still the tank that doesn't disappoint. But I definitely will also admit that's not the case for everyone. Otherwise, this vehicle's win ratio would be better. I think one of the key reasons why I probably really enjoy this tank is because it has the playstyle of my first ever tier 10, the E100 back in the day. But I'd say it's just pretty much a little bit better in every way than playing the E100, at least with the 150mm caliber gun. So an ace tank here for the 60 TP for our 1,307 base experience points, and being able to do double what anyone else on our team was able to achieve in damage also netted us a high caliber. And we get a Brothers in Arms medal as we teamed up with Danzel, who had a great performance in their 121B, who also picked up that top gun. And we did fire a lot of credits on ammunition. However, we still make a decent profit, although that was because we had some kind of action payout. So we would have broken even in this game. But again, this was on my main account. And honestly, if I'd probably been playing a little bit better and I'd aimed better, I wouldn't have needed to fire all of that high explosive anti-tank ammunition. Maybe I was just being a little bit lazy. And that's something that I can do in this tank, because honestly, I think it's fairly forgiving. It's always a tank that does the business, and it's good on a ridgeline, but it's not a Kranvang or a Super Conqueror, which just seem just so cookie cutter in those situations. I like the sass, I like the flavor that the 60 TP has, and if you haven't picked one up already in World of Tanks, you got some pretty okay heavy tanks to be able to get there as well along the way of the Polish heavies. So maybe give this one a go and let me know if it disappoints you. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Sunday, it's time for the World of Tanks Tech Tree Showcase live right now on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. And this week, 211 of you have voted on the poll website, and there seems to be a bit of a tie, the Rinoceronte and the WZ111-5A. I feel like taking it easy, like the Italians today. So I will cast the deciding vote and declare the Rinoceronte the winner. So if you want to see the entirety of the Italian heavy tanks, come along right now, and we'll see if whether the Rinoceronte is really a good tank for you to be able to get or not. And I bet you Twitch is probably going to have a countdown of how many games I have to play in that tank until I end up incredibly frustrated. Anyway, hopefully I'll see you all live right now. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.